For those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Vanessa Kaufman. I am the director of the Alliance to Stop Foodborne Illness. It's a program of Stop Foodborne Illness, the organization which brings together consumers, industry, academics, and regulators to work collaboratively to advance food safety culture throughout the food system. I will serve as your moderator for today's event. Before we dive in, I want to remind everyone online that the chat function, microphones, and your cameras are disabled. You will need to use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists. In the QA window, you can upvote questions to the most popular, and the most popular will rise to the top, and we'll try to get to those first. As always, you can earn 1 continuing education credit from each webinar in the series, and that is applicable to you all in the room too. The details are posted on the Stop Foodborne Illness website and will be distributed via email sometime maybe tomorrow or Monday. You will also find a recording of today's webinar and a copy of the slides on the Stop website. And of course, this is being recorded. Today, we'll be hearing from some of your favorite past presenters and a couple of new perspectives as we explore where they see their food safety culture going. But before we move forward, I want to take you back and review this webinar's journey. I have to say I was in awe as we saw the number of registrants time and time again climb throughout the series. You provided feedback and we listened to what topics and speakers you were most interested in. We addressed 10 topics and 3 of which we were able to bring to you live, including today's event, the 11th in the series, so 10 plus 1. I'm excited about today's panel with the depth and breadth of knowledge on the stage. We actually weren't sure we could fit everyone up here, but I'm glad they did and no one had to share a seat. We have also had 30 presenters come and share the stage with us and share their perspectives. We've had almost 23,000 people register for the series, including about 10,000 unique registrants. So on average, you're coming back to the series at least twice, which is great. Not surprisingly, 85% of our participants were from the US, but 15% were outside of the US and joining us live from places like South Africa, Uzbekistan, I mean, all over the country, all over the world. It's just been amazing to see where people are joining from. So thank you to all of those who are online joining us today. We've also had industry representation that we've been gathering information about this when you register, and 25% of you are from state and local federal government, 26 from manufacturing, and about half from other sectors. We've had an overwhelming amount of YouTube viewership, so even those who registered and maybe weren't able to attend the webinar or saw something they really liked and wanted to go back to it, we have had over 3,000 hours of content viewed from the series on our YouTube page. So if you would like to view anything that you have missed, or maybe you want to get those continuing education credits, please use this QR code. It'll take you directly to the YouTube page. We have also put out 7 white papers. So these are covering the topics that we delved into during the webinar series, and we are compiling all of those, and they should be available soon in one big document. But for now, you can go and download the individual papers. And again, here's the QR code where you can find those. Okay, and I think now it is time to dive into questions from our esteemed panel. I'd like to start with Conrad. Conrad, the Acting Deputy Director for Regulatory Affairs at FDA's CIFSAN, to provide his perspective on food safety culture and where the agency has been and where it's going. Conrad, how has this webinar series supported the goals of the new era for smarter food safety?
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks everyone here for being here today. So I see it as having helped us in 2 ways. So when we committed to working on food safety culture as part of the new era for smarter food safety, we said that we laid out there as our goal was to foster, support, and strengthen food safety culture throughout the food system. And when we rolled it out, we were clear. At the time, I was sharing this effort with Don Prater, we were very clear that FDA did not view itself as the expert in this area, that we were really looking to the experts in industry to help us learn more about food safety culture. So this webinar has provided us an opportunity to hear from practitioners, people that are actually working at strengthening their food safety cultures within their own organizations, which has helped us inform us, both the leadership as well as many of the staff across FDA, understand the challenges that you all have and all the different aspects of work that you've been engaged in to try to strengthen food safety culture. At the same time, the webinar has brought all of you together to listen to these practitioners, and with the hope that we can all learn from each other as we strive to foster food safety culture throughout the food supply system. So I think we are very happy with how this has turned out. We never thought it would be, well, I don't say we never thought, but I think it's exceeded our expectations in terms of the amount of interest, the amount of engagement. We consistently have a very engaged audience every time we have these webinars. So we're really happy about how it's going, and we're hopeful that we can keep doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the people who's been instrumental in bringing the series to bear has been Lone Jesperson. Lone, if I can ask you a question next.
You can.
Okay. That's, I guess, why you're up here, huh? Lone, in your perspective, how far have we come on food safety culture? Can you share how we've evolved since the first GFSI position paper?
Yep. I remember April, I think it was 2014. I was at Maple Leaf and I was having a conversation with Mike Roback, who was chair of GFSI at the time. And we agreed that we were to write up a proposal for the GFSI board to start working towards a position paper around food safety culture from GFSI. And we got 37 industry leaders together for the first meeting in Berlin. And it was like hunting and gathering lions and tigers, because there were so many opinions and perspectives, and 37 people that were so passionate about figuring out what this term food safety culture meant in practice. So how actually to deal with it. And I think based on that, the position paper came out in 2018, I think it was final. And it gave some grounds for what is it and how do you go about looking at your food safety culture. I think that was a big step, and I think GFSI owes some kudos for taking those steps in those days. Then I think if we look at where we're at today, 10 years later, it's hard to believe that none of us have gotten any older looking at it anyway. We're in a situation where I think we have to acknowledge that we stand at risk for doing to food safety culture as a term what we've done to HACCP. And that is to make it a topic of compliance, not a topic of making safer food. And I say that because of all of the great companies that we get to work with that truly wants to make a difference. But I also see how many are chasing after check boxes for audits and check boxes for regulatory compliance, not in the US, but for example, in the EU, where food safety culture is part of the regulation, which I think is just a terrible thing because it's driving that checkbox again. I don't think it's because of anybody in this room wanting to make this a checkbox exercise, but I think it's because of how companies are seeing food safety and how their cultures are still needing to evolve. I'm using some very broad stroke terms here, but you asked me what I'm seeing, Vanessa, and I think that's what we need to decide not to do. We need to decide as a community that we don't want our efforts around culture to become a checkbox exercise. We want to make safe food. And I have the pleasure of working with Mitzi Baum and the Stop Foodborne Illness Board, and 420,000 people pass away every year because of foodborne illness. That's why we focus on culture, because we want to change that number. That's why Conrad does what he does. That's why Mitzi does what she does. And Vanessa does that for STOP as well. So I just think we need to bring it back and say collectively, we don't accept the checkbox. Yes, we need to pass audits, but we're working on food safety culture because we want to save lives.
Thank you, Lone. If I can turn to Megan Conjora now. Megan Conjora is the Senior Manager of Food Safety Culture at the Hershey Company and was one of our first webinar participants. Megan, since you joined us to kick off the series, what progress have you made in your food safety culture journey?
Yeah, I love the segue, Lone. We didn't even plan this, but I was in that first one, and in the food safety learning and training is not a check the box exercise. And what we've done as a company in that first one, I was really talking about getting culture into the processes and things that you're already doing as a company, because it's not separate. It's your company culture, right? You're just incorporating food safety as your value, as your behaviors. And we've really done a lot of work to have a common roadmap for both our manufacturing facilities as well as our corporate work. We've used our lean quality pillar as a vector for that. We're able to have all of the things that our corporate folks are working on, as well as those things that our plants are working on, to have the same playbook and know which pieces are which sections to work on and own. And I think that that's really helped us to stay on track and to try and go against this checkbox that folks are trying to put on for an audit, or, hey, we don't have this. I'm like, no, we totally do. You just have to talk about it differently, right? And put it over here. So it's been a really great journey to make those types of strides in such a short amount of time. So it's been good.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks. And if I can turn to Jorge now, Jorge Hernandez, Vice President of Quality Assurance at the Wendy's Company. Jorge, in our feedback surveys, we had a huge number of people say that they loved your talk about storytelling. You really brought tangible ideas and things for them to take back to their workplaces. I'm wondering where you see storytelling taking us next, especially in the digital age.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. To me, I believe the storytelling for us who are technical, it really is a tool that we need to use to be able to communicate our message and have the impact that is going to be long lasting, right? And you guys talked about check the box. We need to make sure that the message gets there, but it goes beyond that. That is something you leave. And personally, I think the storytelling is that technique that allows us to be able to do that. I think it is something that if we are able to capture it, it allows us to have that long-lasting impact. It is not just about talking now. There are different ways of storytelling. I mean, there is a computer way to do it. There is stuff like that. But it's about weaving that information in a way that our audience is going to be able to understand it, to really identify with it and do something afterwards, right? We all are familiar with it. That's how we learn, right? I remember when we were kids and being able to do that. So being able to use those kinds of techniques, I think, is critical for us. It is something that, in my opinion, is something that is not new, but something that we as technical people are starting to understand and adapt as a need to be able to have a message that's going to be long lasting. And I think that now that we started this journey, it's just going to continue to grow. I mean, I'm not the only one. I mean, there is a lot of people here, and I hear all kinds of stories day in and day out. I see people starting to practice it, and I just believe that this is something that is going to continue to evolve at all of us, right? It's going to evolve at the corporate level. It's going to evolve at the plant level, and the biggest challenge is going to be involved at the personal level with the people that work every day. And as long as we put in those stories and why is it important that we do, it provides us the why that goes with the food safety culture. Then the how allows them to be able to execute every single time, every single day for the benefit of a customer. So I think it's something that is going to continue to grow. I can't predict the future, but I know that it's going to get better and better as more people start practicing and becomes part of one of the tools that we're going to use more, as food safety profession.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorge. And if I can turn to Ola Afolayan, the Director of Global Food Safety and Regulatory at the newly minted Kellanova Company. Ola, we are happy to have you on this final webinar in the series. Can you give us an insight on the most impactful outcome of your food safety culture journey so far and how the split has impacted that journey?
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa, for the question. For those that are not aware, Kellanova is a 106-year-old new company. But most people are familiar with the Kellogg Company. And last year, Kellogg Company split into two companies, Kellanova and the WK Kellogg Company. I am from Kellanova. Thanks for the time. So talking about what has been the most impactful for us, I loved what Lon was talking about, you know, when she mentioned the check the box mentality. I think that every company has a food safety culture. If you just started a mom and pop today, you have a food safety culture. The question is it a positive one, right? So each one of us started with some sort of culture. And someone once said that nobody comes to work wanting to do the wrong thing every day. I strongly believe that everybody comes to work, they want to do the right thing. And for us, what that meant was helping people understand the why, like Jorge was saying. Why is this important? One of the first things we did when we were rolling out our food safety culture were some videos explaining what could happen when food safety goes wrong or when food safety is not effective. And I was part of putting that video together. Till today, when I watch that video again, I have tears in my eyes. Why? Because the story, even though it ended well, the child did not die, hits right at home. And for us, for our employees, that was impactful. That was something that they could relate to. When you think about the decisions you make in the workplace every day, if you think about the fact that your kid could be eating that food, your grandmother that is immunocompromised could be eating that food, it hits differently for you. And for us, tugging at people's heart, going simple has been effective. I have to recognize the efforts of our food safety culture team. They really use the approach of, we want to catch the middle management, you know, the plant leaders being our partners, not just the people, the leaders at the top or the people at the bottom, but the sandwich level, encouraging them, making them a partner in the whole process of our food safety culture journey. And we've used 3 keywords that we call ownership, empowerment, and escalation. Funny that acronyms as OEE, which is what every plant manager is about, you know, having a very high OEE. But we've used that as a, you know, we need to own food safety every day. And our mantra is food safety, I own it every day for every employee at every level. Owning food safety, feeling empowered to take actions, you know, that they don't feel like only their manager can take actions, but they can take actions and they escalate when it's beyond them, you know, to take action. So escalate as necessary. And we're using those mantras, simple, easy solutions, 1-point lessons to share the how to do food safety culture the right way positively. And it's a journey. We're still on the journey, but we're excited for where we're headed towards. And the spin hasn't, I mean, it's 2 companies carrying that approach continuously in their own way. And that has been our experience.
Yeah, we're excited to see where you go too. And last, but definitely not least, Karen McCarty, Senior Director of Commercial Quality and Assurance at Agriper. Thank you for joining us so much. I'm curious if you can share your perspective on food safety culture and some of the differences you see between your business models in the US and Canada.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. So for those that don't know, and most people in the US don't, Agriper we are a Canadian-owned company, and we are a well-known, valued, and cherished brand in Canada. It's a popular brand up in Canada, just like other brands you would see on the store shelves around here. But for our US manufacturing sites, we are a B2B, we're business to business. So we make bulk product or ingredient product and we move it to somebody else who cuts and wraps the cheese or uses the ingredients in anything from chocolate to infant formula and other products. So in the US, we don't really have a market space. We don't have Agriper as a brand that people attach to. We attach to the brands of all of the folks that we sell to in the US, whereas in Agriper Canada, I think there's a little bit of a different model when you're more in that B2C space, business to consumer space. There is, and I remember I think it was Megan who made the comment when we first got together to kind of talk about the panel, and her excitement and the way she talked about food safety culture as a retail brand was very different than I think that I hear it talked about maybe more in the ingredient space. So I started reflecting on that, and you can see when your name is out there touching the consumers, you automatically have pride in what you do. And I'm not saying you take less care when you have an ingredient, but I think there's that extra value added in because you see it directly on the store shelves. You see your family eating it. You see your friends eating it. And in ingredient space, if maybe you don't quite have a clear understanding of who your customer base is, you can, I think, create a feeling of maybe feeling disattached to the food. So some of the things we do in the ingredient sector is when we do GMP training every year, we say, here are all of the brands that you work with every day that our ingredients go into. You're not just making powder in a 25 kg bag, you're making food that feeds babies. And some people say, well, I didn't know that our products went into the infant formula that I feed my children. So I think having to make that connection is something that's a little more purposeful in the ingredient space. And the second answer to that between the B2B and the B2C, in the US, it's a little bit different in the dairy industry because of the pasteurized milk ordinance. So there's a high level of continuity between what FDA does and what CFIA does in Canada. From a regulatory lens, they're very different. Maybe different styles of implementing the regulations, but they're equivalent. But what the US dairy industry has, and I'm speaking from my dairy lens, is the pasteurized milk ordinance. And it's been around what feels like since forever. And it's this thing that people in the dairy industry say, we go, I'm fine, I follow the PMO. And that has been foundational to the way of operating. Not that we don't have to think about what we do, but because it is so prescribed and it is so regulated and it is so common and popular, you kind of don't build a plant or operate without being at least compliant to that. So when you start talking about doing extra things or the lens of our customer shifts above and beyond and getting more and more stringent beyond that, it kind of creates this gap a little bit between what has always been good enough and maybe what the new lens is of the industry or our consumers or our customers. And I think it's a little bit hard sometimes for industry to understand what has shifted or what has changed. Lone and I were talking about that a little bit earlier today, that kind of B2B, B2C difference and how industrial companies are maybe facing different challenges or have a different way of approaching their food safety culture journey than maybe folks that have brand names out there in the marketplace. So those have just been some observations I've had. I don't know what's behind it. I bet Lone has some data behind it, but I know that's just something that I've been reflecting on as being a little bit different.
Lone, do you want to follow up with that or are you?
No,
No.
but I guess the only thing, I completely agree with Karen said.
Okay.
And I think
I'll just say the PMO is 100 years old this year.
Oh, happy birthday,
Happy
PMO. Oh, I have a question for the audience. Who can tell me what section of the PMO has pasteurization in it? Who's my dairy people out here? No dairy people?
no. Are you alone?
That is surprising because we have a full room for those who are online. And
Nobody
can't
in dairy.
see.
What section is pasteurization? And I don't know my CFIA as well. The reason I ask the question is it's really funny. You go into all of these processing plants and they say, I follow the PMO. And I say, find the section in the PMO on pasteurization. They go, I've never read it. They know what to do, but they don't know where it is.
Well, with that, I think it's time. I think it's time to start taking some questions from the audience. So we have folks online who are submitting questions. I haven't had a chance to read all of them yet. So Chris Waldrop has a mic over here and is happy to run it to anybody who has one in the room. I will ask, so the camera can't follow you. So please state your name and your affiliation when you ask your question and do use the microphone.
And Vanya has a.
Oh. Anybody have a question for the panel?
You make a very good point. Oh, sorry. My name's Ashley Drake, and I'm with Crow Transportation, a mom and pop storage and distribution facility. We just started our food safety culture program in 2021, and I'm very new to the food world. But you made a very good point. Food safety culture in other businesses that don't open product, don't see the brand names. They, don't get that connection like you would in retail space. So as a panelist, what would you, and also same thing with CEO, which is also my father. Hopefully he doesn't see this. But yeah, so how do you connect with those people that have been in this business for a while, for one thing, and never is low risk facility? And how do you connect that this change of food safety culture for those people on the floor, but also your CEO?
So you want to change your dad? A little beyond scope.
I can take the first crack if you want,
Go
because
for it.
I relate to what you're asking. So I have a couple of ways of answering that. So you make a comment about the change management of the change journey that you're on. This is fundamentally change management. And change management is a soft, touchy-feely thing that we don't do in industry, right? And there's models for change management. We follow the ADKAR model. And it's ProSci, out there. It's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And most of us in my industry, in the dairy industry, we're very good at the awareness piece. We're not quite sure how to touch on desire, and then we switch to knowledge and then ability and reinforce it once. So I would say take a look at change management as one opportunity, and you're going to have to come at it again and again from different angles until you find the connection point. We had a same kind of a culture or an awareness opportunity as some of those ice cream recalls were going on a couple of years ago. And we're not ice cream manufacturers. We're cheese and whey proteins, but we like to take those opportunities to talk about maybe some common GMP challenges or common infrastructure challenges and point out their roof leak is no different from our roof leak, guys. Come on. And one of my colleagues was telling me a story, and she was presenting all this ice cream information. And one of the production managers came up to her after, and whatever she did, flipped the switch. This listeria is a big deal, and whatever, and she, we come at people with this information all the time. So you have to keep coming. You have to do the repetition piece, keep it fresh, keep it interesting. I like the storytelling piece of it. You have to be relatable and you have to be real and find that connection point. And once you get your in, you have to keep expanding on that and kind of growing out your team of people. Once you get your in, it'll grow. But you might have to try it at a few different times to get the in, to find that relatable point where someone follows you along. It's kind of an influence thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll add a little to that. I think, and I'll tag on Stop for that. So Stop has videos and stories of people that have been impacted by food safety situations in their life, maybe lost a family member, maybe still dealing with it. It's part of their everyday. I think that's always a place to start to show what could go wrong. And then in your own system, I love the example you gave with roof leak. Roof leaks are roof leaks, whether you're transportation or you're food manufacturing. Understanding in your process, what are the potential places where food safety could fail? I think if you can help your team understand those potential opportunities and then help them understand what could then happen if those things happen, you're in a better place to safeguard against those even becoming an issue. I think that's a place to start.
Ola, I think that's such a really very good point that you've made, because I think you have to, regardless of your size or your situation or family relations to your boss, I think you have to think about what's the problem that you're trying to solve. Because one thing is that we like to talk about food safety culture, but for some of us, it might actually be that what we have, Ola said before, we all have one. It actually is okay to what we need to get done to make safe food or transport it or whatever it is. So I think you need to go back and say, so why are we even trying to change in the first place? Are we just trying to put a check in the box, or are we actually trying to change some assumptions that people make every day? Because we've got to think of culture as this collective amount or number of assumptions that we have adopted over time because it's making your organization successful. So you're actually winning by behaving in a certain way. That's your culture, right? So you got to think about, do you have to change to continue to win? And what is it that you have to change if food safety, if roofs are leaking or something like that? So I think you need to go back to what's the problem you're trying to solve by focusing on your food safety culture.
If I
Well-
can build just real quick on that one, I think, I'm in complete agreement. There is a saying that we like to say with the team, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Look at examples of recalls. Look at examples on FDA actions. Look at examples that may resonate with your company, that may resonate with your father. You'll be able to do that and use them as a way to tell a story that this is what happened. These are the consequences. And then maybe I recommend that then you add, and this is why we do X, or this is what we need to do Y, or this is starting to make him care. Maybe it's not about the health of the consumer because he doesn't get to see it, but maybe it's about the possible regulatory action. Maybe it's about the recall that can happen. Maybe it's about the fines that are imposed if something happened. There are tons of examples like that, unfortunately, that you can use and start bringing it home to have that understanding and not be able to own the risk and own the solutions. If we do Y, we are both this, right? But don't just let the story down and say, this is why we do that, or this is why we don't want to do that, or this is why we want to change to do that. Try to put it in his own terms so that he can understand it and start figuring, oh, now I start to why it's important to me to behave in a certain way.
I want to react to something Lone said about like asking. No, you didn't say anything wrong. Not too wrong, at least. No. No, well, you said something about like ask yourself why you want to change, right? But I might rephrase that. It's like, okay, if there is no need to change, ask yourself what you're doing that's right, because you want to make sure that you are not just assuming your culture is okay. I think you need to be intentional about your culture, identify what is working, and how do you maintain that? Because people come and go in your organization, your leadership can change. So you want to build a culture that's resilient to new people coming into it. You want the culture, the people to come in to assimilate to the culture you have, rather than it can take one individual can wreck a culture. I've seen this happen. And so you want to make sure that you have written down what the culture is, what the values are, how are you maintaining those values, how are you training your employees, how are you onboarding them, just to ensure that you are continually refreshing people's minds about why it is you do the things that you do.
Yeah, and Conrad, I would like to just add on to that because I think back to when we, as the Hershey Company, started on this journey. Lone, you were still with Maple Leaf and Spear. I'm calling you out in the audience there. We, of course, at that time did not have a burning platform, the good crisis. We didn't have a crisis. We didn't have that place to start from. So it's awesome when you're starting from a place of strength, right? And you don't have a giant incident that you're trying to recover from to do a great transformation of your food safety culture. However, that makes it all the more difficult, right? You don't know what you don't know about your culture yet. And you might think it's great and it really isn't. So what we did, and what I would recommend to companies also who don't have that, is to rely on your business partners. Your dad's language is business as a CEO, right? And using that language. There was a great session a few days ago. You can get the slides if you didn't attend, on being able to use that business language to speak food safety. And I think that's a really important piece here, and using your business partners to do that. I know that we don't make any meats, but these are our business partners because we're in the food industry, right? Use those folks who have had those experiences and can help you understand what happens when something bad happens and how you can use that at your company. We don't make meats, we make chocolate and popcorn and pretzels, but the consumer is at the center of all of our businesses. And being able to rely on those folks, reaching out to the people who are, and the companies who you're storing things or delivering for or shipping, being able to have them come and talk about why it's important to change if you need change. I think that's a really important part, is leaning on all the folks in this room and all those people that you might have networked with today or yesterday, reaching out and using each other to strengthen your own cultures.
And then you have to go in and look at the Stop Foodborne Illness Toolkit.
The toolkit. I was getting there. Thank you.
Yeah. Fantastic resource that's available to you, right?
An award-winning toolkit.
And
now.
award-winning.
One in a word.
Hello, everyone. I'm a food safety consultant. My name is Bill. I work in Canada. Hence, I didn't know your question. Food safety culture is an integral part of food processing. Are consumers aware of food processing, of food safety culture, and the extent to which it is an integral part of food processing?
Do consumers need to know?
Mm.
I guess that's my question. I mean, I would hope that they would, I think the consumer assumes that you are producing safe food and.
Word assume is data.
That's good.
Yes, and unfortunately, the consumer has been proven wrong a few times, right? But I don't know if awareness of food safety culture on the part of the consumer is necessary. Does anyone else here think that it would be helpful for consumers to?
So I have maybe a question back for that. We're all food safety professionals up here on the stage, and I'm assuming quite a good number of food safety professionals in the audience. We have a unique view into what we do and how we do it. We understand our food chain. Go to the grocery store, go to the gym, listen to your neighbors. God forbid you go to social media. The lack of understanding of where food comes from is probably a larger challenge that I would want to address first before getting into the nuances of food safety culture. Because I one of the things, data management is always a challenge for everybody, right? I feel like that's a little too much noise in the consumer space, but to your point, what can we advocate for from the food industry to help the consumer be more savvy and more responsible with us for food safety? Don't get me wrong, as manufacturers, we all own it and we know it. And I expect you to cook your food. And the "and" part is sometimes missed.
Vanessa, just a word from the audience, this guy with the mic out here. One of the things for those of us that speak directly to consumers, we also might think about the lessons that we're learning from food safety culture in the industry. Can you apply some of those same lessons when you talk to consumers? Because we want them to handle food safely in the home. We want them to cook food to the right temperature. Are there certain values that we can speak to with those consumers that we're learning from the work we're doing here that then can help them understand their own culture? We don't talk in those terms. We probably shouldn't talk in those terms, but you can speak to consumers in a different way that may help them understand why it's so important to cook your food to the right temperature, to wash your hands. That can be a useful tool.
I think maybe just one
Yeah,
other answer on that one, Bill. I think it's a really great question because I personally have a little bit of sustainability envy, because I see how companies and especially senior leaders are really sitting up and investing in sustainability. And while I think that there's some genuine reasons for that, I also think that there's a lot of the reason comes from that consumers are putting pressure on companies. So I think companies change their efforts around sustainability to some extent because consumers speak that language and put pressure on companies to make change in their choices. So I go back to Karen's point, which I think was really profound, because it might not be food safety culture, but do we need to put more effort on how we just get the language out there around food safety in a different way, to Chris's point, so that consumers can put more pressure on all of us as industry. I love to get consumer pressure to make change because we know it's important, and it's also messages that we can use internally in our work. So just a slightly different angle to it. Yeah.
and I have a kind of different view on that.
Mhm.
Of course, but we do a lot of work as a confectionery company with food allergy groups, and we're coming up on Food Allergy Awareness Week next week. So I hope all of you are ready for that. But we do a lot of work with industry groups, and I was able to go with our manager of allergens to one of these industry share days where there's food allergic parents, there's just people with food allergies who are adults. And we were able to talk to them about what we do from an allergen management perspective as a company across the board. And these people and they're like probably the most in tune with food safety, right? A food allergic, anyone related, right? We all know this. And they were just floored. They were like, you exist in a company, you're focused on helping people understand that they need to do the right thing for allergens. Like they were kind of dumbfounded. And I think in a way, our consumer contact is showing our consumers our food safety culture, right? That's one way that we're doing that directly. How are you answering someone's question who says, hey, was this made in a facility with blah, 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 because my child is allergic to this? And how are you answering those questions? How are you reaching out to them? And if any of you have a food allergic child or a food allergy yourself, if you're a member of any of those parents groups or No Nuts Mom group, which is like a really big one, you'll see on there, your food safety culture is already rated. Go do a company search on there, right? It will tell you what are people trusting? What brands does the most vulnerable, group every day buying food? Who are they trusting? And if it's not you, you might be able to identify some blind spots in that way. And I'm sure there's other ways that we reach out, but that really resonates with me because that's close to our hearts. So yeah.
So it's not like they know anything about food safety culture, but your food safety culture has come through in the way you communicate to your
Yeah,
consumers.
absolutely.
Right.
I guess maybe not the term,
Right.
right, but the actual culture.
Mhm.
Yes.
Concept.
Yeah.
So I have a question, if I might. Food safety culture has been reduced to law within the European Union. And so now that it is law, all of these bits and bobs about what it is and what it ain't is enforceable. So what about food safety culture being codified in the United States? And how would that look like from an enforceability standpoint when the FDA came in and wrote a 483 against your lack of food safety culture? How would that work? How would that look?
Now everyone wants the meeting.
That one's for you, Conrad.
Well, honestly, we aren't thinking about regulating it, not in that way, because I think we're in agreement with what Lone said. It doesn't really make sense in terms of making it a check the box exercise. We have looked at it from the perspective of, okay, well, what could we do as a regulatory agency to help standardize maybe approaches toward food safety culture? But there's no one size fits all, obviously. But maybe there are some basic guidance that we could provide. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we could even take that step. And so if any of you have been watching any of the webinars over at least the last 4 or 5, I think Lone and I have both made pitches towards working towards some sort of predictive validity of food safety culture. We have done research, looked at the literature, the academic literature, and there is a big gap in terms of identifying whether or not and how food safety culture predicts food safety performance, right? We in this room, we all are confident that a strong food safety culture will lead to good food safety behavior, good food safety performance, better KPIs, probably fewer recalls, fewer foodborne illnesses and deaths, right? We all assume that and that's why we are working at this in this field. But no one has actually demonstrated that in a quantifiable way. And so we're looking at, but if we can, if we could do that, which I'm pretty confident we can, if we all collaborate on this, then now we have quantified the public health benefits, the economic benefits of food safety culture, and you could even convert it into financial benefits that you could use to convince your C-suite into like investing efforts into strengthening food safety culture. Once we and if we can do that, then FDA can use that information not to regulate, but to prioritize. So we could say, well, we know that this sector of the industry, they consistently have strong food safety culture because we're getting information from their assessments, for instance, and we know that they have a strong food safety culture. We know from the literature that strong food safety culture means they're less likely to have an incident that would lead to some problem. So we'll focus our resources over here. We'll look at this other sector where we know the food safety culture is weaker, or we might even, and maybe even to the firm level. So that all implies the need for data. And that's where we are, this is the pitch here, right?
There will be t-shirts.
There will be t-shirts. But, you know, we're looking at ways to encourage people that are engaged in food safety culture to share data. We're looking at ways like a platform that we could potentially use where people could share their data on their assessments of food safety culture and their key performance indicators in a de-identified way. So that way we can tease out, we can do those analyses to tease out, well, what is the actual relationship between food safety, culture, maturity, and key performance indicators. And then that understanding that relationship or those relationships, because there are likely many of them, we can use that information to inform how we move forward as a regulatory agency, but not in a rulemaking way, more in a way of like, okay, we've learned from our analyses that these three aspects of food safety culture are the most important predictors. And so we're going to provide guidance to industry about that information, or we'll make the data available for industry to do those analyses. So that's sort of where we're thinking right now. And that's going to take some time, and it's going to take a collaboration with industry and regulators.
And we will take names and so don't hold back.
I think, you know, one thing that we can also attribute to this conversation is, you know, right now there's no regulation and companies are putting efforts, money, you know, everything it takes to improve their food safety culture. And there's progress. Why would we want to put a check the box behind that? You know, why would we, anything that has some sort of legality to it, gets in the sense, in the mind of the employee as I gotta do this because my job requires it, rather than I gotta do this because I want to make sure that every pound of food that I put out there is safe. It hits differently. And I think that's why some of us feel like, don't regulate this, keep it just the way it is, because it's working.
Right. We don't want people to engage in it because someone's looking over their shoulder, making
Yeah.
sure they're doing it.
So
Exactly.
I have a question for that. And first, agree. Want to put that out, fully agree. And everybody's at a different point on their change journey, right? So I think we also have to be cognizant of those out there that their first step into change is because they have to be compliant. And I don't want to take away from that motivator for some companies who are less mature in their food safety culture. So it depends on where you are and what you're starting with. Compliance is not a dirty word. It's actually a good thing. And if that's your foot in the door to start building your program, that's okay. If you start out with, for food safety culture, I'm doing Genba walks. We're talking about complaints in the management meeting. I present out ones. Like if you have to start getting the message going in a structured and formalized way in your journey, that's okay. That's good. And then eventually that's going to evolve into something very organic, very natural. You're going to get that groundswell and it's going to move forward. And I think that's where companies struggle a little bit. Well, how do I get started if I'm not actually supposed to start doing something specifically? So it's that balance, a kind of chicken egg thing.
But I will say there's plenty of regs out there for people to be
Right.
compliant to and.
Correct. GFSI is one of them, right? All of our customers are others.
Is it on? Is it on? Okay. Hi, my name is Liliana Casal Wardle, and I am a food safety consultant. I'm a senior advisor for the Atchison Group, and I have my small consulting. I started my journey with Megan in Hershey, and I'm very passionate about food safety culture. But one thing that still concerns me or makes me think is look at your supply chains. And I mean, you all have amazing food safety cultures, undeniable. But how do you export that? What tools do you use to guarantee that your supply chain, your packaging materials, your ingredients, your distribution system, your external partners are going to drive the same models and guarantee that that consumer that buys your products or that B2B that uses your ingredients is going to have, I call it the joy of eating because I love eating. So that joy of eating every time they eat. Thank you.
I can start. I'll start. It's a journey. And that's part of what we're talking about here. Food safety culture is not, is existent at any stage, but getting to the desired place is a journey. And I feel that your journey has to start with yourself, and if you're able to, within your own company, have a solid plan, then you have a leg to stand on to share. But if you've not been successful at home, what are you talking about to your partners? And I feel like if you start at home, your next journey, like for us, actually our next journey that we are starting right now is our co-mans and our suppliers, sharing our toolkits with them, sharing our journey with them, sharing with them, hey, here is something that we've been doing over the past few years, and this is the outcome of it. We're not making it a quote unquote requirement, but hey, share with love, share the love. Follow us on this journey, come with us on this journey. And that's, what I think is the approach to this.
I agree with it. And I like to build up on that because that's exactly what we're doing. We are talking about our culture and what we build out, but we had our, a couple of years ago, we had our meeting with our suppliers, main suppliers, one of the things that this is what we're doing. We'd like to understand what are you doing with that enforcement, with that requirement. And the goal here was to establish a conversation about learning from each other, right? What are the things that you're doing and be able to do that? And we have had those conversations ongoing and understand from those conversations that they're at different points in their journey. What we don't want to do is say, it has to be like this, it has to fit this wall, because I think that would kill their own culture. Can't do that. But understanding that they're making it a priority, understanding that this is part of the way they work, it helps us develop that relationship. And to be honest, telling them we're still in the journey too. We're not perfect. It is a continuous improvement journey. So I think that's what I hear you say, and that's what we are doing too. But not saying we do this, you do that, or you copy what we have. It's just, what are you doing about it? It's how important it is to you. And that in a number of situations that I can think of, spark the initiation of the conversation because they haven't thought about it. But the majority of them already are where we're doing something about it, at least from my perspective.
I'm going to come from the supplier space.
Sure.
Not all of our customers are as enlightened as you, and it is not a hand-holding journey. It is an expectation, and if we are not sufficient, we have to put in a corrective action to close the gap. That becomes a check the box. So if all of our customers were sorry, I don't mean Agripur, all of Ag. If industrial suppliers like a company like Agripur and other people out there that are one step back in the supply chain, if we had partners like this all of the time, I think the journey would be very different for people. But the auditor doesn't always have the conversation that way. They say, please show me how it is you are complying with food safety culture and what are you doing? And then if you don't have an answer, you have a deviation and you do have to fix it. So that's how this compliance piece becomes a really tough way to get out of. Now you're doing it because you have to, not because you want to. And then you're going to go to your leadership and say, we got to do it, or we can't sell Calanova anymore. They're going to pull their business. And that's not what you want, right? That's not the relationship that we want. So I think there's probably some really cool opportunities out there to address this a different way and change the messaging to make it not thou shalt, thou must, but let's all do this together. I think that would be nice to see more of that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that it talks to the maturity of the company as well. You know, one of the things we're all in different shape or form in the industry. We use a TPM, you call it different things, you know, we call it KWS, Calanova Work System. And it's an approach that uses a tier-based, you know, journey, where at tier 1, you know, it's the frontline leaders, tier 2, their supervisors, and so on and so forth. We are embedding the food safety culture into that. In other words, if you're a facility that have matured to a certain point in that system, then your food safety culture needs to be along that journey. It doesn't make it a check the box, but it makes it a thing of pride, so to say, show your maturity. And maybe that's, you know, something that could work for suppliers.
I agree.
And, you know, customers as a thing of pride of showing maturity, you know.
And then we can connect to your brand ownership. We become part of your brand ownership story.
Exactly.
The panel is doing so well that you are addressing almost every single question that is coming online. So this is a plug to those who are listening in virtually to keep asking questions. I'm not ignoring you. We're just covering all of them. So we'll take another one in the room.
Thanks. So this is Donna Schaffner. Recently from Rutgers University and transitioning to Georgia. But so everything you're saying is great, but for smaller companies, this is a difficult thing. HACCP, Food Safety Modernization Act, they say some very specific things that must be done. So companies can work on that. And then you start talking about food safety culture. And that's a little more nebulous. And the biggest question I hear from a lot of people, and my neighbor here was speaking of a minute ago, is how do you measure it? How do I measure what is my food safety culture in my company? And I think that's, and I don't want to say that Conrad was wrong a while ago, Conrad, but I think Jorge, who never said, why is it important about the consumers knowing what kind of food safety culture you have? What does Wendy's do? They put ads on TV with happy employees serving the burgers, right? All the kids around me know, oh, that company on the TV that has the happy cows. I want my mom to buy milk from the happy cows. And there was a cereal company not that long ago who put ads on TV with happy employees smiling, saying, I eat this cereal and my family eats this cereal. So it is important that consumers and your employees and people have the culture that they're happy at work and want to come to work and want to do the right things. But getting back to that, you're going to have to check a box somewhere because you guys are asking for it. You want your suppliers to tell you they have a good food safety culture. So can you give some specific examples of how do they measure that? What's the specific thing you want them to tell you they're doing to show that their little company, wherever it is, has got a good food safety culture?
So I'd like to start with the measurement, if that's okay.
Sure.
So it's not hard to measure culture. It's about choosing a tool that's been validated so that you know it's actually giving you a result about your culture, not something else. I think so. There's lots of tools that can do that for you. I go back to Conrad's point too, which is far more important, and that is, so if you're focusing on how your employees perceive the importance of food safety, or how competent they are, and how effective information is when that's being shared, then that should lead to an improved food safety performance, be that GMP violations go down, or there's less positives or something like that. And that's not size related. It's not whether you're big or small that you can do that. It's not size related at all. We work with a goat cheese manufacturer up in Northern Victoria in Australia that has a lot of goats and 10 people. And it's all about saying, well, what are the behaviors that are critical for making safe goat cheese every day? And get them to define them for themselves. And then say, how does that tie into your food safety performance? So I just think we need to demystify a little bit this whole topic of measuring, because I get that question a lot. And then people go out, and I know I'm shooting myself, sorry, John, in the foot here, but it's not about the measurement in the first place. It's about making safe food, right? So it's about saying, what's the tool, what's the measures that we already have that can be indicators of our culture. Megan said it really well. They measure the number of communication activities that are related to vulnerable populations that your company can help with. But that's a measure. How many of those do we do? How many did we say we were going to do? How many did we do? Be creative around what's the behaviors that you want to see that you know leads to improve food safety performance.
Absolutely.
So the only thing I'll say, and I know that Jorge wants to jump in here, at least I think, is that you cannot just go out and download a survey from the internet and say that now I'm going to measure culture in my company. It does not work that way. You wouldn't go onto YouTube and order a set of listeria detection kits and then go out and say that you measured for listeria in your company, right? I mean, it's got to, did I say YouTube?
You did.
I did. That's probably a reflection of the age. I meant eBay.
I thought you were looking for TikTok. I thought you were doing TikTok, a TikTok store. Yeah.
TikTok, but hey, you can't go into some of these questionable social medias and then buy a detection kit, right? So don't do that for measurement tools for culture either. Look for something that's been validated.
Does the toolkit have anything on measuring?
It has questions you can ask. It has some what to look for in a validated or a measurement tool that's actually appropriate for what you're looking for. So how do you select a measurement tool? But we deliberately said we're not going to put a measurement tool in there because it's about you being able to ask the right questions to select the ones that are appropriate for you. Did I summarize that okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Can
And if
I
you
add
go-
on to the tool piece, or do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead. You guys keep going with tips.
So I'm going to give a shameless plug to Lone and her company, because I found that the tool that Cultivate has to be a really interesting way into the conversation within the dairy organization, within the dairy industry. So a couple of years ago, the dairy industry decided that they had some interest in food safety culture, wanted to understand a little bit more about it. We're old fashioned. So through a partnership with DMI and Lone's company Cultivate, we went through her assessment tool, and it's not a grade tool. It's to help you understand where you're at tool. And so and for a small company, so I'm going to look at it from a lens of an artisan cheesemaker and the challenges that you have with HACCP plans and food safety plans and all of these must. Got a small number of people, you're already overloaded, you're trying to figure out how to put the resources on this. It's very overwhelming, even training and teaching and educating and stuff in English and Spanish and all these things. There's a ton of tools out there that we're starting to develop for the small companies, and they're very robust. But now again, so now you're going to add on the next thing. Now it's food safety culture. Now I got to do this. So the assessment tool helps you understand more of what the nebulous concept of food safety culture is. If you just figured out what HACCP is, food safety culture is hard for you, right? So the assessment tool puts your feedback into very clearly understandable and segmented ways of looking at your culture. And it tells you the view from a line worker to a supervisor to a manager to a leader and an executive in your company. And how are their views different? What does that tell you about your company? And then it scored, we participated, it scored all of our facilities not only against each other for us as a company as a whole across our manufacturing sites, but then we can compare ourselves to the rest of the industry. And lo and behold, most of the industry sits in about the same spot. And data rose to the top in the dairy industry, which I found to be fascinating, that the things we do well are leadership, messaging, and training. And the things we struggle with are data management, change management, problem solving, and recognition. And if you take those 6 data points and you look at them together, it's fascinating, right? If you're so good at leadership messaging and training, where are the other 4 so hard, right? You know, so it really gives you a perspective, and then you get to work with Lone and her team, and she gives you a nice presentation. She breaks apart the data for you. She makes it explainable. So if the concept of food safety culture is what you're struggling with, partnering with someone who can help you understand what your data is telling you, I think is really powerful. Because I think that's the hardest part for most people is they don't understand what the concept is. They want to put a checklist to it, and they don't understand how to engage with it. And then from that information, find one thing, do one thing, one specific measurable thing, and make a difference, and then do another, and then do another. And all of a sudden you're where these guys are of like, it's just part of our DNA. It's what we do every day. And there's really not an option, you know, and you can get there.
Absolutely.
So just very quickly, I want to address part of your question that you answered. I mean, that you asked, I'm sorry. And that has to do about how we're going about it. When we don't measure food safety culture, when we ask them what do you do stuff, we measure food safety. We measure quality compliance. We measure regulatory compliance. We have very strong, we've been doing for a long time, right? What we are trying to figure out, you know, is we have about 500 and some different suppliers, right? And as we are going into this journey, and we should look, this is what we do, and this is what we do, we're trying to learn from them. And my hope is that at some point we started putting what we heard here, the ones that are better at it have certain key points that we can learn and from them to be able to do that without telling them what they are. Because if I started in this, we've been having this conversation within my team. Why don't we tell them that we want to see A, B, and C? Why don't we, you know, make it part of our specification of our requirements? And I said, no, because then that stifles them. I want to see what they're doing. And then I want to learn with the ones that are successful by our metrics of the results. Then I come back to like maybe we can learn from that one or that one and bring it inside, right? So maybe at some point we'll get there. We're not there. Right now we're saying, what are you doing? Is it important to you? What are the things that you're looking for? And we do, you know, like to find some questions about leadership and about all of those things, but I don't want to put them in a box yet, right? I want them to develop their own because they have their own culture, right? That it should be natural. But the results, those are non-negotiable, right? And that's what is important to our business. Hope that makes sense.
I think that's a good place to end this portion. Jorge, thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left in the whole series. Can you believe it?
No.
No, I can't either. So I'd like to just go down the panel and ask one final question, and we'll start with you, Karen. And it's the same question for everyone. What's next? What's next for you? What's next for the industry? Where do you see food safety culture in the next few years, decade? Pick your choice.
The future I would like to see is actually just sort of an outcome of what we've been talking about with the panel. I would love to see a collaborative partnership on food safety culture. I think there's too many companies and firms out there doing it on their own and not understanding what it means and trying to do a check the box approach. I'd love to find a way to have that supply chain integrated with shared values and common purpose. And we do this to make the entire industry better. So when there's a recall in the industry, and again, I'll speak for dairy, it's bad for the entire dairy industry, even if it's goat milk, right? No offense to the goat milk people. You know, so we have to take a look at it. We are all in this together across the entire supply chain. It isn't just what touches the consumer, but the consumer will stop buying an entire category of food if they deem it unsafe. So we do have to find common purpose and hold each other accountable.
Was it? Yeah, I would agree with Karen's comment. I think that, you know, I mentioned earlier on that for us, the phase we're in right now is engaging our suppliers, our co-mans. But I think I envision a place where we as food industry really imbibe and live that what some of us say that food safety is not a competitive advantage. It should never be. We truly need to get to the point where sharing your food safety strategy, sharing what is making you successful, even if that is for food safety culture, is an open and honest conversation. I think that is the future of food safety culture that cuts across the industry for us.
Well said.
Yeah, from my perspective, I see the concept of food safety culture continue to evolve. And as we continue to learn from it, it's going to be starting to define areas, define things, and then define within those areas what are the key points, the leverage points, the things that we'll be able to do that. And then in the future, I see a company to be able to do that, learn from those points and say, that one works for me, I can bring that one in so that I can improve this part that is going to give me the results. That one doesn't work for me, that's not for me. So you can, it's kind of like a tool. I don't hate to use, toolbox, but you're able to have that position. So to me, food safety culture at one end is not going to be a painting that is going to be, but it's going to be like a impressionist painting with a lot of dots and be able to that the company can be able to take the ones that make sense for them and make the picture that they want so that they can live by it in the business, from that moment forward. So that's how I see the evolution go.
I see all of that as well.
Oh, good.
I see it too. I see it too. No, I would love a place where we're all together. And I think not just across the industry, but I think across our companies, a big theme this week has been speaking the business language and making food safety a business enabler. And I really feel like, for me, like what I would want the future to look like is you have a CEO like ringing the bell on Wall Street talking about food safety as being like the reason they're up there, right? Of a food company, of course, or food related company, but making it be top of mind for our business leaders. I know that we are also business leaders, but we have to think of ourselves in that way as well, and really help to start change our own mindsets in terms of going kind of bigger and broader than us just trying to put it on our shoulders and then our partners' shoulders, really putting it on our business leaders and helping them understand that we are really the only reason we're allowed to do business here. So that's my dream, is when they're dinging the bell, they're talking about food safety.
I would really like to see this connection to predicting food safety performance, because I don't think we're going to get many bells rung by leaders unless we can show that. And I'm a little afraid that unless we get to that point where our leaders can see that we actually have predictable impact on the business success, that then this will become something that we're going to be a little bit spinning our wheels on, because it's then forever going to be many of you and everybody else that's in front of senior leaders trying to convince them still why this is important. And I think we need to break that cycle. And I think the way to do that is getting at it very statistically and saying, what is the predictive connection between food safety culture and performance of food safety? So again, Conrad and I will take names.
So I agree with everything that everyone here has said. I love the vision that they've all laid out. So I'm not going to repeat those, but where I think what we as an organization, FDA, has been trying to do over the last 10 years, thinking about implementation of FSMA. FSMA is intended to move us into a prevention mindset. But those rules are just standards. They are minimum standards, right? Compliance with FSMA rules is the minimum. We want people to go beyond that, right? And food safety culture is that, going beyond. As we are embarking on our reorganization and our refocus in a way, it is, and the intent is here for us to get out of the business of response. We respond to outbreaks, we respond to violations, and we have a lot of effort in that, but that's not, we are a public health agency. Yes, we are regulatory, but I mean, in my mind, as a public health servant, my goal is to work myself out of a job, right? To make sure that we don't have to respond to outbreaks and respond to violations. And I see food safety culture as that. If we can figure it out, that if we can reach this world of collaboration across the food sector around this idea of food safety culture, then maybe we can get there and be in a less responsive mode and have a safer food supply.
Well, I think those are all beautiful visions for the future, and hopefully we'll get there soon. I want to say thank you to our panel for joining us. Thank you to everyone in the audience who's been here today and throughout the 10+1 webinars that we've held. I also want to make a shameless plug for the award-winning toolkit. If you scan this QR code, you can go there. You can also find any of the webinars that you've missed. And we are opening up our second class of 40 under 40. Food safety professionals, and that'll be open June 7th, World Food Safety Day.
Oh.
So please nominate your favorite rising stars in food safety.
How about 40 over 40?
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.